The arena was electric that night. Thousands of fans filled the seats, their voices blending into one massive roar that echoed through the entire stadium. Camera flashes flickered like lightning while commentators spoke rapidly into their microphones, trying to keep up with the growing excitement. Tonight wasn't just another fight. This was the moment everyone had been talking about for weeks. Inside the ring, under the blinding white lights, two fighters were preparing to face each other. On one side stood a powerful, confident challenger, younger, louder, and completely certain of his victory. He had spent days mocking his opponent in interviews, promising the fight wouldn't last long. According to him, this match was already over. But on the other side of the ring stood someone very different. An older man, quiet, calm, completely still. While the crowd shouted and cameras zoomed in, he simply stood there with a relaxed expression, as if the chaos around him didn't exist. That man was Steven Seagal. For many people in the arena, he looked almost too relaxed. Some even wondered if age had finally slowed him down. Across the ring, his opponent paced back and forth with confidence. That man was Chuck Norris. And tonight he had made a bold promise. He said he would embarrass Seagal in front of the entire world. The crowd loved the confidence. Many believed him. After all, when a fighter shows that much certainty, it's easy to assume they know something everyone else doesn't. But there was one small detail the crowd hadn't noticed yet. While Chuck Norris looked confident, Steven Seagal looked something else entirely. Prepared. And as the referee stepped into the center of the ring to begin the match, a strange feeling spread through the arena. Because sometimes, the loudest person in the room isn't the most dangerous one. Sometimes, the quietest one is. The tension between Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal didn't begin in the ring. It started days earlier. During the official pre-fight press conference, reporters from all over the world had gathered inside a packed media hall. Cameras were lined up across the stage. Microphones stretched toward the fighters, and fans watched the live stream with excitement. Everyone expected a few bold statements. But no one expected the moment that followed. Chuck Norris leaned toward the microphone with a confident smile on his face. He looked relaxed, almost amused by the entire situation. "Let's be honest," he said casually. "This fight shouldn't even be happening." The room immediately grew quieter. Some reporters leaned forward. Others quickly prepared their cameras. Chuck continued speaking, clearly enjoying the attention. "Steven Seagal used to be good," he said with a shrug, "but that was years ago." A few people in the audience laughed. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances, because sitting only a few feet away from him was the man he was mocking. Steven Seagal. And yet something strange happened. Seagal didn't respond. He didn't interrupt. He didn't even look angry. Instead, he sat calmly in his chair, hands resting together, listening quietly while the insults continued. That silence seemed to encourage Chuck even more. "You know what?" Chuck added, leaning back in his chair. "I'll make this simple. The fight won't last a minute." The crowd inside the room reacted instantly. Some reporters gasped. Others started whispering to each other. Predictions like that were bold, even for professional fighters. But Chuck Norris didn't look worried at all. In fact, he looked completely certain. The moderator then turned to Steven Seagal. "Steven," he said carefully, "would you like to respond?" For a moment, the entire room waited. Dozens of cameras zoomed in. Everyone expected anger. Or at least some kind of challenge. But Steven Seagal simply adjusted the microphone and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "If that's what he believes," he said quietly, "then we'll find out soon enough." That was it. No insults, no threats, just a simple response. But strangely, that calm answer made the atmosphere even more tense. Because experienced fighters in the room recognized something important. Confidence can look many different ways. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's aggressive, and sometimes it's completely silent. The press conference ended shortly after that, but the moment didn't disappear. Clips of the exchange spread across social media within hours. Fans began arguing in comment sections. Some believed Chuck Norris was absolutely right. They said he was stronger, faster, and more aggressive. Others disagreed. They pointed out something interesting. Steven Seagal hadn't looked worried even once. Not during the insults. Not during the predictions. Not even when Chuck promised to end the fight in under 60 seconds. And that calm reaction made some fans wonder something. Did Seagal know something everyone else didn't? Or was he simply hiding his nerves better than anyone expected? Fight night would answer that question. Because now the two men were standing face to face inside the ring. The referee stepped forward between them. The crowd's noise slowly began rising again as the moment approached. Chuck Norris bounced lightly on his feet, full of energy. His confidence was obvious. Across from him, Steven Seagal remained still, focused, watching, waiting. The referee raised his hand. The bell was about to ring, and in just a few seconds, the entire world would find out whether Chuck Norris's prediction was confidence or the biggest mistake of his career. The referee stepped back slowly. The arena lights seemed even brighter now, reflecting off the white canvas of the ring. Thousands of people leaned forward in their seats, waiting for the moment everyone had come to see. Across from each other stood two legends of martial arts. On one side was Chuck Norris, bouncing lightly on his feet, full of energy and confidence. On the other side stood Steven Seagal, calm and completely still. The contrast between them was impossible to ignore. Chuck Norris looked like a storm ready to explode. Steven Seagal looked like a quiet lake without a ripple. The referee raised his hand. For a brief second, the entire arena held its breath, then, D-Iron. The bell rang. The fight had officially begun. Chuck Norris moved first. He stepped forward quickly, circling the ring with fast footwork, testing the distance between them. His eyes stayed locked on Seagal, searching for any weakness. The crowd roared with excitement. Everyone expected action immediately, but Seagal didn't rush. He moved slowly, adjusting his stance, watching every movement his opponent made. Chuck threw the first strike. A quick jab aimed straight toward Seagal's face, fast, sharp. But Seagal tilted his head slightly to the side. The punch missed by inches. The movement was so small that many people in the audience barely noticed it. Chuck immediately followed with another attack. This time a stronger punch, aimed at Seagal's body. Again, Seagal shifted just enough to avoid it. No panic, no wasted motion, just calm precision. The crowd's cheering slowly changed tone. At first it had been excitement. Now it was curiosity. Chuck Norris pressed forward more aggressively. Another punch, then another. His attacks became faster, each one thrown with more power than the last. But something strange kept happening. Every time he attacked, Seagal avoided the strike with the smallest movement possible. A step, a turn of the shoulder, a slight shift of his weight. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. Yet somehow every attack missed. From the outside, it almost looked like Seagal wasn't even trying to fight. He simply moved and the punches never landed. Chuck Norris began to notice it too. His expression slowly changed. At first he had been smiling, confident, relaxed. But after several missed strikes, the smile disappeared. He threw another combination. Right punch. Then a quick kick aimed toward Seagal's side. Again, nothing connected. Seagal stepped back smoothly, avoiding the attack without breaking his calm posture. Now the arena grew noticeably quieter. People started whispering to each other. Something about this fight felt different than what they expected. Chuck Norris was known for his speed and power. Most fighters struggled to keep up with him. But here, inside this ring, it looked like every move he made was being predicted before it even happened. Chuck stepped back for a moment, breathing heavier now. He studied Seagal carefully. "Why aren't you fighting?" he muttered. Seagal didn't respond. He simply watched. That silence only made Chuck more frustrated, because the harder he attacked, the calmer Seagal became. Chuck rushed forward again, throwing a powerful hook aimed at Seagal's head. The crowd gasped, but once again Seagal moved just enough to avoid it. This time, however, something changed. Instead of stepping away completely, Seagal remained close. Very close. Close enough that Chuck could see the calm expression on his face. For the first time since the fight started, Seagal spoke. His voice was quiet, almost impossible to hear over the noise of the crowd. "Slow down," he said calmly. The words surprised Chuck. For a moment, he almost laughed. "You think I'm tired?" he replied with a smirk. But Seagal didn't answer. He simply adjusted his stance again. And that small movement caught the attention of several experienced fighters watching from the audience. Because they recognized it instantly. Seagal had finally shifted into a different position, a more controlled one. A stance that suggested he wasn't just avoiding the fight anymore. He was preparing to end it. Chuck Norris didn't notice the change immediately. He only saw another opportunity to attack, and with growing frustration, he rushed forward once again. But this time, something very different was about to happen, because the man he had been chasing around the ring for the last minute was no longer avoiding the fight. He was ready to respond, and the next move would change everything. Chuck Norris's frustration was building with every missed strike. The younger fighter had spent the past minute aggressively attacking, throwing combinations with speed and power. But every punch, kick, and strike had been effortlessly avoided by Steven Seagal. The crowd was electric. At first they had cheered for Chuck, expecting a swift victory. But now a strange silence settled over parts of the arena. Phones were raised to record every move, but no one dared look away. Something was shifting. Chuck's movements became more erratic. The confident smirk that had carried him through so many fights disappeared, replaced by a subtle tension in his jaw and a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He threw a spinning back kick, aiming high. Confident it would connect, Seagal didn't even flinch. With a single smooth pivot, he shifted his weight, the kick slicing past him harmlessly. No wasted motion, no dramatic dodge. Just a slight step to the side, and Chuck overextended. The young fighter's foot caught awkwardly on the canvas, and he almost lost his balance. The audience gasped. Murmurs rippled through the stands. Experienced martial artists watching from the sidelines began to nod knowingly. They could see it. That small, calm movement wasn't luck. It was mastery. Chuck stepped back, breathing a little heavier now. He could feel it, the realization creeping in that this fight was not going the way he expected. He tightened his fists and charged again, faster this time, throwing a flurry of punches aimed directly at Seagal's head and torso. For a moment, it seemed like the tide might turn. The punches came closer, faster. The crowd leaned forward, anticipating a connection. But then it happened. Seagal didn't just avoid the strikes. He began redirecting them. A punch to the chest was subtly deflected using Chuck's own momentum. A hook aimed at the head was slid aside with a barely perceptible turn of the shoulder. With every strike Chuck threw, Seagal absorbed the energy and subtly guided it away, leaving the younger fighter increasingly off balance. Chuck's confidence started to crack. His breathing became heavier, more labored. The crowd sensed the change. The loud cheers for the challenger faded slightly into tension and anticipation. Every eye was locked on the ring. Then Chuck tried something risky. He launched a powerful sidekick aimed at Seagal's midsection, a move designed to break through any defense. It connected, sort of. Seagal tilted just enough, taking most of the force on his side and pivoting Chuck's momentum forward. The younger fighter stumbled slightly, and a wave of disbelief rippled through the arena. Chuck had expected at least some resistance, maybe a block, but he hadn't expected his own power to be used against him. Seagal finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and carried across the tension-filled ring. "Control yourself," he said. Chuck paused for a brief second, stunned by the serenity in Seagal's tone. He had expected anger, intimidation, anything to match his own energy. But there was nothing, just calm. That single moment was all Seagal needed. He shifted his stance slightly again, small enough that only a trained eye could detect it, but it was enough. In a fraction of a second, he redirected a rushed punch, grabbed Chuck's arm, and with a subtle twist and turn of his hips, used Chuck's own momentum to send him off balance. The younger fighter stumbled backward. The arena went silent. Every person in those stands, from casual fans to professional fighters, froze. Phones hovered mid-air. Mouths open, but no sound came out. Chuck barely managed to steady himself, heart racing, eyes wide. For the first time in decades, the unflappable Chuck Norris felt shocked. Seagal didn't celebrate. He didn't shout or show anger. He stood calm, hands at his sides, watching as the young fighter tried to regain composure. His face revealed nothing, but his aura told the entire story. The fight was no longer about strength or speed. It was about precision, control, and mastery. And in that instant, everyone realized something. The quiet man in the ring was not just defending himself. He was teaching a lesson. A lesson in humility. Chuck raised his fists again, but the confidence was gone. His movements were cautious, now hesitant. Every strike was measured, every step calculated. The arrogance that had carried him into this ring was fading under the weight of Seagal's calm dominance. The crowd sensed it. Whispers of, "He's not human," and "How is he so calm?" spread across the arena. Even seasoned fighters looked on, impressed and slightly fearful. Then Seagal moved again, one step forward, a subtle shift of his weight. And suddenly Chuck was off balance once more. He stumbled slightly, and the realization hit him like a punch, harder than any he had thrown. This wasn't a fight about age or youth, or speed or power. It was about control. And in this moment, the quietest man in the ring had proven he was the most dangerous. The audience held its breath. Every single person in that arena knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Chuck Norris, the legendary fighter who had rarely been bested in his career, was facing an opponent who was not only keeping up with him, but slowly dismantling his confidence, all with calm, precise movements. And in that moment, the fight reached its point of no return. Because one mistake now, one lapse in judgment, and the entire arena would witness the downfall of the man who thought he was untouchable. The quiet lake had become a storm, and Chuck Norris had no idea what was coming next. The arena had fallen into a different kind of silence. Chuck Norris, legendary for his speed and precision, was still standing barely. His chest rose and fell rapidly, sweat glistening under the bright lights. He wiped his brow, trying to focus, trying to regain the momentum he had relied on for decades. But across the ring, Steven Seagal remained calm. Every movement, every subtle shift of his weight had been deliberate. He wasn't attacking recklessly. He wasn't trying to overpower. He was waiting, watching, calculating. Seagal's eyes scanned Chuck's movements like a chess master analyzing his opponent's next 5 steps. And the crowd could feel it. Even casual spectators sensed something almost intangible, danger hidden in serenity. The younger fighter lunged again, desperate to regain control. A flurry of punches, fast, aggressive, powerful, shot toward Seagal like a storm unleashed. The audience leaned forward, some cheering, some holding their breath. But Seagal's response was minimal. A slight step to the side, a subtle deflection with the wrist. Not a single wasted movement. It was as if Chuck was hitting air, as if his strikes had no weight at all. The more Chuck attacked, the calmer Seagal remained. A whisper of recognition rippled among experienced martial artists watching from the sidelines. They could see it. This was not just defense. This was a master quietly teaching a lesson. A master letting his opponent realize their mistake, without raising a hand more than necessary. Seagal finally spoke, just above a whisper. But somehow every microphone in the arena captured it. "You're moving too fast," he said. Chuck stopped mid-motion, almost confused. His confidence wavered. "I tried to stop you." Seagal continued, calm and measured. "Not for me, but for you." The words didn't make sense to most of the crowd. Chuck Norris's jaw tightened. "For me? I don't get it." He muttered under his breath, as if realizing he was being underestimated and humiliated. The audience began noticing the pattern. Every strike Chuck threw was being subtly redirected. Every attack's momentum was being used against him. It wasn't brute strength. It wasn't speed. It was knowledge, experience, and control, and it was methodical. Whispers spread through the arena. "He's not just defending himself." "As hell." "No way." Even Chuck began to notice it. Seagal wasn't just avoiding attacks, he was setting up something bigger. There was a rhythm to his calmness, a hidden strategy only visible to someone trained enough to understand it. He was not fighting impulsively, he was calculating. Every tiny movement told a story. Every shift of weight was preparing for a precise moment of impact. And the arena's energy shifted. Fans who had been rooting for Chuck began to feel something unexpected. Suspense, fear, admiration, all at once. They could sense the quiet danger emanating from Seagal. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he was calm, too calm. Chuck tried to speed up again, throwing a high kick aimed at Seagal's chest. But instead of just stepping aside, Seagal subtly changed his stance, and Chuck's kick glanced past him harmlessly. The slight miscalculation caused Chuck to stumble just a fraction. It was enough. For a split second, the younger fighter froze, realizing he had been anticipating the wrong move. That tiny hesitation, unnoticed by most in the crowd, was all Seagal needed. Seagal's movements remained minimal. He didn't raise his fists aggressively. He didn't lunge or attack recklessly. Yet the audience began to feel the tension rise like electricity before a storm. For the first time, Chuck's expression changed completely. His eyes widened slightly, and the smirk that had carried him this far vanished. Doubt crept in. The crowd could see it. Even seasoned martial artists could see it. Because Seagal's calmness wasn't passive. It was active control. Every subtle shift, every measured step, every whisper of a defensive movement was purposeful. And the message was clear: the fight was not over. It had only just begun. Seagal leaned forward just slightly, still maintaining composure, and stared directly into Chuck's eyes. The tension was almost tangible. Even without moving aggressively, Seagal's presence alone communicated a silent warning. You don't know what's coming. And Chuck, for the first time, felt the weight of that warning. The audience could almost hear the mental battle inside Chuck's head. What is he planning? They could imagine him thinking, how can one man be this calm, this precise, and still standing? Seagal's calm was a trap disguised as serenity, and it worked. Chuck's aggression began to falter. Every movement became measured. Every strike slowed slightly. He realized he could no longer rely on speed or strength alone. And the crowd leaned forward, sensing it. The storm that had been quietly building was about to break. Because now the fight had shifted. It wasn't just about who could punch harder or move faster. It was about control, strategy, and mastery. The arena, filled with thousands of spectators, was now collectively holding its breath, every eye locked on Seagal, everyone waiting. Waiting for the moment when the quiet man would finally reveal what he had been preparing all along. Because the danger was no longer in the punches Chuck was throwing. The danger was in the man standing perfectly still in the center of the ring. The quiet master, the calm storm. And the audience knew it. The question now was simple. When would he strike, and how devastating would it be? The arena was tense beyond belief. Every spectator leaned forward, eyes wide, hearts racing. The quiet calm of Steven Seagal had transformed the fight from an expected exhibition into a moment of pure suspense. Chuck Norris, once confident, now moved cautiously. His attacks were slower, calculated, almost hesitant. He could feel it, the presence of someone who understood more than brute strength or speed. Every muscle, every reflex, every strike was being read, analyzed, and countered with effortless precision. Seagal's calmness was no longer just a strategy, it was a signal. The storm had been quietly building, and now it was about to break. Chuck charged again, desperate to regain control. He threw a flurry of punches faster than before, aiming for Seagal's head and torso, determined to force an opening. The crowd's volume rose again, a mixture of cheering and anxious murmurs. But Seagal didn't panic, he didn't overact. He simply moved just enough. One punch glanced harmlessly off his shoulder. Another was subtly redirected using Chuck's own momentum. The young fighter's energy, which had been his greatest weapon, was now his weakness. Then it happened. Seagal shifted his weight slightly, stepping into a precise position that only a master could calculate in the heat of the moment. Chuck's next punch, a powerful right hook aimed at Seagal's head, became the final mistake. In a single fluid motion, Seagal redirected Chuck's momentum, twisted his wrist, and used his body to sweep Chuck off balance. The younger fighter stumbled, his foot catching on the canvas. The audience gasped collectively. Some thought Chuck had fallen accidentally, until they saw Seagal's calm expression, watching unshaken, unhurried. Before Chuck could recover, Seagal executed a subtle yet devastating joint lock, controlling Chuck's arms and forcing him toward the mat. The crowd erupted in shock. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of the move, precise, controlled, and effortlessly effective. Chuck Norris, who had dominated countless fights, was momentarily immobilized. The realization hit him like a sudden punch to the chest. He had underestimated the quiet, composed fighter standing before him. The arrogance that had carried him into the ring now seemed misplaced. The referee moved closer, carefully observing, but even he paused, struck by the mastery on display. This wasn't just a fight. It was a lesson in control, humility, and experience. Seagal didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply released Chuck, stepping back slightly and maintaining perfect composure. The audience held its breath, waiting for the next move, but there was none. The lesson had been delivered. Chuck slowly got to his feet, breathing heavily, his expression a mix of disbelief and respect. He realized that speed and aggression alone were not enough. The calm, deliberate mastery of Seagal had turned every punch, every kick into a trap, and Chuck had walked right into it. The crowd erupted into applause, but it wasn't just for Seagal's skill. It was for the elegance of his control, the way he had maintained calm under pressure, and the way he had proven a simple truth: mastery is silent. Even Chuck nodded subtly. He extended a hand, a gesture of respect, acknowledging that he had been bested not by strength alone, but by wisdom, precision, and the quiet confidence of a true master. Seagal accepted the handshake, still calm, still composed. No victory dance, no words of triumph, just the silent acknowledgement that respect, not arrogance, defined true strength. In that moment, the audience understood the full magnitude of what they had witnessed. Chuck Norris, one of the most legendary fighters in history, had come face to face with a man whose calm mastery transcended aggression. And for the first time in the fight, the arena realized the quietest, calmest man in the ring had been the most dangerous all along. Fans would talk about this fight for years. Clips would go viral. Analysis videos would be made, breaking down every subtle movement. But one thing remained clear: arrogance can never withstand composure, precision, and mastery. The arena slowly emptied, but the lesson remained. Every person who witnessed the fight, fans, fighters, commentators, carried with them a simple truth. True strength is quiet, calculated, and controlled. And in that moment, Chuck Norris learned what many never do: never underestimate calm. The fight was over. But the lesson would echo far longer than the bell ever could. The arena had quieted to a hum of awe and disbelief. The fight was over, but its impact was just beginning. Chuck Norris, who had entered the ring with supreme confidence and a hint of arrogance, now stood in front of Steven Seagal in complete silence. His chest heaved from exertion, sweat dripping from his brow. For a moment it seemed the younger fighter didn't know what to say, how to react. Seagal, calm as ever, didn't rush the moment. He didn't shout, celebrate, or humiliate. He simply stood tall, hands at his sides, eyes steady, exuding a quiet mastery that was impossible to ignore. Then he spoke softly, clearly, but with authority. Strength, he said, is not about proving you are better than someone else. Strength is about controlling yourself, respecting your opponent, and knowing when to act and when to remain calm. Chuck Norris nodded slowly. His expression shifted from shock to understanding, as if the fight had been more than just a physical challenge. It had been a lesson, one that could only be taught through action, not words. The crowd, sensing the significance of the moment, held their breath. Some wiped tears from their eyes, others whispered in admiration. They realized that what they had witnessed wasn't simply a fight. It was a demonstration of discipline, respect, and true mastery. Seagal continued. Ego may push someone to act recklessly. Confidence may fool you into thinking you are unstoppable. But control, calm, precise control, is what separates a moment of chaos from a moment of clarity. Chuck took a deep breath, lowered his fists, and extended his hand. Not in defeat, but in respect. The younger fighter, still catching his breath, met Seagal's calm gaze and shook it firmly. The crowd erupted in cheers. Not for a knockout, not for an explosive finishing move, but for the lesson that had just been delivered. Everyone in that arena, fans, fighters, commentators, now understood a simple truth. True power lies not in aggression, but in control, discipline, and respect. Seagal looked around at the crowd. Respect, he said, is not something you demand. It is something you give to everyone. Not because they are strong, not because they are weak, but because they are human. A hush fell over the arena as his words sank in. Social media lights flashed as spectators captured the moment. Live streams froze on Seagal's calm face. Clips would go viral, but the lesson would resonate far longer than any highlight reel. Chuck Norris smiled, a genuine smile this time. He raised his hand again, this time not to fight, but to acknowledge that he had been reminded of something important. No matter how skilled or experienced you are, humility is a weapon stronger than pride. The older man, Seagal, stepped back, nodding subtly, and allowed Chuck to center himself. There was no animosity, no desire to dominate, just clarity, just mastery, just a demonstration that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one everyone should respect the most. Fans began chanting, some in awe, some out of pure excitement, but all with admiration. Some shouted Chuck's name, some Seagal's. But the real takeaway was clear: the lesson had been learned. Arrogance meets calm mastery, and the result is always revealing. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, social media buzzed with clips and reactions. Fans debated, shared, and analyzed, but the central message remained clear: mastery is quiet. Respect is earned, ego is fleeting. Seagal turned, giving one last calm nod to Chuck Norris, a gesture of forgiveness and acknowledgement. No humiliation, no revenge. Just wisdom, patience, and the reminder that power is measured not by what you can do, but by how you choose to act. Chuck Norris walked out of the ring slowly, his head held high. He had not been humiliated, nor defeated in spirit. He had learned, and that learning was priceless. Seagal remained in the center of the ring for a moment longer, taking it all in. Then he nodded to the audience, a silent acknowledgement that the lesson was complete. And for the fans, the lesson was unforgettable. Control beats chaos. Calmness beats arrogance. Respect beats ego. If you believe respect should be given to everyone, comment Ruspis below. Share this video with someone who needs to see that true strength is quiet, precise, and disciplined. Subscribe for more stories of mastery, courage, and unforgettable lessons that leave you thinking long after the bell rings.